The silence inside the Valencia paddock wasn't peaceful, it was heavy. It was November, the air was crisp, and for the first time in 20 years, the scream of a Yamaha didn't sound like a rhythmic hum, it sounded like a predator. As the garage doors of the Pramac team creaked open, all eyes were fixed on the number 7. Toprak Razgatlıoğlu, the man they call El Turco, was no longer a spectator or a Superbike star trying his luck. He was the most expensive gamble in Yamaha's modern history. But as he approached turn 1 at over 340 kilometers per hour, something happened that made the veteran mechanics freeze. Instead of the smooth, flowing arc typical of a Yamaha, the bike pitched forward violently. The rear wheel rose nearly 2 feet off the tarmac, dangling in the air as the carbon brakes glowed a lethal orange. It was a stoppie at racing speed, a maneuver that physics and Michelin tires said should be impossible. In that single second, the hierarchy of MotoGP didn't just shake, it shattered. No one inside the paddock expected what would unfold next, and it would change everything for him, his team, and the entire 2026 season. But behind that calm expression Toprak wore during the morning briefing, pressure was building fast. To understand why the air was so thick with tension, you have to understand the stakes. For years, Yamaha had been the finesse bike of the grid, using an inline-4 engine that prioritized corner speed over raw power. But by late 2025, they were being bullied by the Italian V4s of Ducati and Aprilia. Yamaha knew they needed a revolution, not an evolution. They didn't just build a new bike, a brutal V4 prototype. They went out and hired the most violent rider in the world to tame it. Toprak's move was the Pramac divorce heard round the world. Paolo Campanotti's team had been the golden child of Ducati, but they walked away from the best bike on the grid to become Yamaha's spearhead. If Toprak failed, Pramac's reputation would be buried. Yet the real turning point happened away from the cameras, in a private meeting where Toprak's manager, the legendary Kenan Sofuoglu, made it clear. Toprak wasn't coming to MotoGP to learn the smooth way. He was coming to bring the chaos of superbikes to the elite class. The paddock whispers were cruel. Many believed the Turkish rider was too old, his style too dirty for the refined world of Grand Prix racing. But what the paddock discovered next shocked everyone. Inside the garage, whispers began spreading as the first telemetry data started hitting the screens. Usually when a Superbike champion moves to MotoGP, the first few days are spent unlearning old habits. The stiff prototype chassis and the sensitive Michelin tires usually punish anyone who tries to manhandle them. But Toprak wasn't unlearning, he was imposing his will. Yamaha's engineers had spent months obsessing over the V4's braking stability. They expected Toprak to struggle with the transition from the steel brakes of his old BMW to the carbon discs of the M1. Instead, the data showed him hitting peak brake pressure earlier and harder than even the factory riders. He was forcing the bike to remain stable under a level of deceleration that data simulations had previously flagged as unstable. The technicians were intently monitoring the screens, eyes wide. It wasn't just fast, it was unnatural. He was treating a multi-million-dollar prototype like a backyard stunt bike, and somehow the lap times were dropping into the hysterical zone. However, the twist that followed would change the championship narrative entirely. And from that moment, nothing would ever be the same for the Pramac executives. Paolo Campanotti, a man who has seen every legend from Rossi to Marquez, was described by insiders as hysterical on the pit wall. It wasn't panic, it was the realization that they had caught lightning in a bottle. Toprak wasn't just setting fast laps, he was doing it with a consistency that sent a dangerous signal to the rest of the grid. Usually rookies are fast for one lap and then collapse as the tires degrade. But Toprak, Superbike style, squaring off the corners and spending less time on the edge of the tire, seemed to be the accidental cheat code for the 2026 Michelin compounds. Telemetry showed that Toprak was exploring the bike's potential in dead zones, areas of the track where most riders are coasting. He was either 100% on the throttle or 100% on the brakes. There was no middle ground. Yet as the sun began to set over the Valencia circuit, a new conflict began to brew. While Toprak was flying, his teammate, the veteran Jack Miller, was watching the data from across the garage. And what he saw was a teammate who was rewrite the rulebook he had spent a decade following. Yet this was only the beginning of a far bigger storm. But what happened next in the debrief room left even the most seasoned team members stunned. Jack Miller is no stranger to the stoppie. In fact, the Australian had built his brand on being the late-breaking king of MotoGP. But as Miller looked at Toprak's braking markers, he reportedly joked with a hint of genuine disbelief. "I finally have a teammate who can do a better stoppie than me. I already have a feeling of inferiority." It was a lighthearted comment, but the underlying tension was real. Miller had been brought in to provide the steady, V4 experienced development hand that Yamaha desperately needed. He was the teacher. But Toprak was proving to be a student who was already outrunning the professor. The dynamic inside the Pramac garage shifted in a single afternoon. The team was no longer looking for incremental gains. They were now looking at how to build a bike specifically for Toprak's violence. According to some mechanics, the atmospheric pressure in the garage was suffocating. Every time Toprak went out, the rival teams Ducati, KTM, and Aprilia would stop their own work just to watch him enter turn 1. But what the Paddock discovered next shocked everyone. Yet the real turning point happened away from the cameras, specifically in the tire fitting area. The Michelin technicians had been skeptical. They warned the team, if he keeps braking like that, the front tire will collapse within 5 laps. In MotoGP, heat management is everything. If the front tire gets too hot, the pressure skyrockets and the rider loses all feel. Toprak's style should have been a death sentence for the rubber. But as the session progressed into long runs, the shock transformed into confusion. Toprak wasn't just maintaining his pace, his lap times were actually improving as the fuel load dropped and the tires wore down. He was using the rear wheel to steer the bike while it was still in the air, a technique that bypassed the overheating issues other riders faced while leaning over. Some insiders claimed something felt off, as if Toprak had found a loophole in the laws of physics. Rival team bosses were seen whispering in the corners of the paddock, questioning if Yamaha had found a disputed advantage in their new aero package. However, the twist that followed would change the championship narrative entirely. But behind that mask of a friendly rookie, Toprak was sending a chilling message. At the official launch of the 2026 Pramac Yamaha team, standing alongside a gleaming V4 M1, Toprak didn't give the standard corporate answers. He openly admitted that he refused to change. "It's impossible for me to change everything straight away," he told the gathered media. "My riding style was shaped by superbikes. Yamaha didn't ask me to be another rider. They wanted me to remain Toprak." This was a declaration of war against the smooth era of MotoGP. While the rest of the grid was trying to ride like computers, Toprak was riding like a gladiator. Rumors suggested deeper tension behind closed doors at Yamaha HQ in Japan. The traditionalist engineers wanted him to adapt to the bike, but the results were so explosive that the Pramac project was given total freedom to let Toprak be wild. He wasn't just fighting his rivals, he was fighting the expectations that had been placed on his shoulders since his very first race. He was a man with nothing to lose and a world of skeptics to silence. What happened after that left even his closest team members stunned. As the test session concluded, the final timesheets were posted. Toprak wasn't just close to the premier riders. He was in the top 10, a mere fraction of a second off the reigning world champion's pace. For a man who had never raced a MotoGP prototype until a few months prior, the performance was staggering. But it wasn't the time that scared the paddock, it was the how. Toprak had survived severe high-speed incidents in his career, he had fought through heavy setbacks and difficult recoveries in World Superbikes, but he had never looked this comfortable. The 2026 season was no longer just about the fight between Ducati and the rest. It was about whether the grid could handle a chaos hunter who didn't care about their rules, their lines, or their traditions. The hysteria in the Yamaha garage wasn't just about speed. It was the realization that the era of predictable racing was officially over. MotoGP 2026 seemed to be a new stage for Toprak to prove that his extreme style was not a weakness, but a deadly weapon. As the lights dimmed on the Valencia test, one thing was certain. The Turk hadn't just arrived, he had broken the door down, and the rest of the world, they were just trying to figure out how to survive the impact.